Hello. Today I'm going to show you how I make a couple different types of dual texture climbing holds out of pieces of scrap wood. So to get started making your climbing holds, you're going to need some sort of wood. You can use pieces of pine or cedar, 2x4 as building material. They'll work fine, but they won't last as long as a hardwood. You can also use some tight grain hardwood like cherry, maple, or walnut. I would stay away from things like oak or hickory just because they're a little bit splintery and more hard to work with. And then the third thing that I would use would be just scraps of nice plywood. The plywood's easy to laminate and good for making thicker pieces and bigger climbing holes. The next thing you're going to want to find after you find wood is some sort of tools. You're going to need something to cut the wood, which maybe could be a circular saw, a jigsaw, small hand saw. It's up to you, whatever you have available. Then you're going to need something to sand and shape the wood. I like to use a variety of different wood rasps and files, or an angle grinder with a flap disc, along with some sandpaper and a variety of sanding blocks. Then finally, if you're going to do a dual texture climbing hold like I'll show in the video, you're going to want some sort of latex paint. It can be indoor or outdoor, it doesn't really matter. And then some fine sand. I found this bag on Amazon for about $4. I also use a drill for drilling the holes for bolts or screws, whichever you prefer. And some glue. I'm going to start off by laminating a few pieces of plywood so that the glue can set while we work on the other holds. First of all, get your glue. Get your 2 pieces of plywood. And apply a liberal amount of glue onto the plywood so you get a good lamination. This I'm using a Titebond 3, but Titebond 2 would also work. Then spread the glue around. I just use my hand. Get a little bit more glue. Okay, then stack your 2 pieces of wood how you want them, and clamp them. Clamped. Now I'm going to use a jigsaw to cut out some shapes for different types of climbing holds using the 3 different pieces of wood. 2x4, this angled piece of walnut, and this piece of weirdly shaped cherry. First chunk. Second chunk. Cool. Always have a fresh blade in your jigsaw. It helps make the cuts a lot smoother. Okay, so now we have this angled piece of 2x4, this weird U-shaped piece of cherry, and this little piece of walnut. Before I start sanding and shaping them, I like to attach the holds, how they're going to be attached to my table, make it a little bit easier to work with them. So I'll start with this piece of cherry, and I'm going to use this countersinking drill bit and drill some holes in the cherry so I can anchor it down to the table. I've decided, for the sake of this video, I'm not going to work on shaping this piece of 2x4. If I were to use this, I would probably shape down this front edge, and I would use it as is as a little mini jug, but I'm just going to work on these two. So now that I have them drilled, I set them down on my table, and then I drill them just onto my table using a few wood screws. For this smaller hold, I'm going to go over it with this, it's like a 2 grit file. I'm going to use the smoother side and just round off the edges so they're not as sharp. And then I go back over with a coarse grit of sandpaper, and then I'll use the sanding block to hold it. And I'll just go over those same edges. Take off any splinters. And that one is really easy. It's all done now. It's a small 4-finger half pad crimp, and it can be attached to your wall with 2 screws. Easy as that. And for this bigger hold, since it's a little bit larger and it's going to require a little bit more shaping, I'm going to use this larger, more coarse grit wood file and start shaping down some edges. I want to make those edges a little bit softer, so I'm going to go in and do a little bit of work with the angle grinder and a flap disc, 4D grit flap disc. Always wear glasses when using an angle grinder. Safety glasses if you don't already have safety glasses on. So now as you can see, the texture of this has gotten a lot smoother. I'm going to go back over it with a little bit of coarse grit sandpaper and sanding sponge again. Hold it like so. So that climbing hold now has some pretty good shape. Maybe take a little bit more of a few of the edges to make it a little bit softer as you see them, but it's pretty good shape. It's a nice hold on top. I'm now going to show you a method I use on some of my climbing holds called dual texturing. So what you're going to want to do is get some painter's tape, and you're going to apply the painter's tape to the surfaces that you do not want to be dual textured or painted. So for me, I'm trying to keep everything looking wood except for this top edge. I want this top edge to be nice and grippy. Okay. And you can wrap it along the sides or the back if you'd like. And really press the tape in well. You want it to be a good, nice seal along the edges. And I do the back as well. Just keep everything clean. So I'll put a line on the front. And then I'll continue that around the back. That. Okay, so now that I've done that, just this top crest is exposed, and that's where I'll be putting the texture. So now you get your paint and an implement to open it. So I'm using this chisel, an old chisel. You could use a screwdriver or a paint can opener. Then open up your can of paint. Ooh. Okay, then you get a ridiculously large paintbrush for a small can of paint. And you shake the paint, stir it, whatever, before to get it ready. Then dip a little bit in there. And then I just go and I just paint this wooden part with this paint. You want it to be a thin layer so it's not soppy, but you don't want it to be so thin that the sand isn't going to stick to you. You can paint over the tape as long as you have a good seal on the edge. Alright, so once you have all the surfaces covered, for the most part, maybe add a little bit extra in case it's a little bit dry in some spots. Because you do want the paint to stick. There you go. Alright, so that's pretty good. And I just take a sprinkle of sand in my hand, and I just lightly sprinkle it all over the hold. Okay. Some people also mix the sand into their paint prior to applying it. I find that it's easier to just do it afterwards. But to each their own. You apply it and then shake off the excess. Okay, and then you let that sit to dry, and we'll work on the other end. Same concept for the smaller hole. This one will be a little bit easier. I only want this top edge personally, so I will just go like this and wrap it all around in one big piece. And boom. That. Make sure the edge is sealed and go through that same process. Those either like sand, some sand ASMR. Alright, so now I'm going to set these two aside to dry and work on the bigger volume. Okay, so this big hold is now set up. It's all glued together, 2 pieces of plywood. So I'm going to figure out what kind of shape I want and sketch it on there with a pencil. This little marking device. So I'm thinking I'll kind of do like a round. Okay. Sweet. Same as the other two, I'll be connecting these to my wall using screws. So I will screw this bad boy down to the table before I start grinding. Yep.
Supper's ready.
Alright. going to start to shape this piece, and I'm going to wear this respirator just because the angle grinder gets pretty dusty. It's pretty dusty, so I'm going to continue to wear my mask. But I'm going to go through and do that same process for this one. Basically for this one, I want a big sloping edge right here. And I want that whole thing to be painted grip. So I'm going to go start applying my tape. That, make sure it's good and stuck. Okay. Like that. So your pen and your implement. Got it. Alright, now I'll set this one aside to dry. And I'll work with my two originals. These are my two that have been sitting here drying. Set aside my sand. Now I'm going to take these and just kind of lightly brush off any of the extra sand that's not sticking to the paint. Okay, still got a good bit. Then you're going to take your brush and dip back in. And I usually like to try and get a nice thin coat on so I can get the grip still coming through. So I will brush it on like so. And then just kind of sponge paint it like this. And then immediately after this coat, I like to go in and start peeling off my tape. This just helps get a nice clean edge if you peel off the tape when you still have wet paint. There you go. Oh, a little bit too much paint here. Okay. There you go. Then we're going to let that one dry like that. Then we're ready for polyurethane. Set that one there. I'll start working on this next little mini one. Just a touch. Okay. And booyah. There's another nice dual texture one, and we'll let that dry. I'll let my big one dry, and then I'll be back to do the other one. Alright. So now I've allowed time for this big one to dry. We're going to go back and apply another coat. So same process. Get the paint on, spread it around, and just dab it on like that. Alrighty, so now just let that one dry. It's got our second coat on there. We let that dry and then we'll go to poly. Then apply a coat of clear coat. I'm using this Rust-Oleum paint and primer to clear coat. If you're not in a ventilated area, wear a respirator or else go to a ventilated area because this stuff's pretty fumy. Empty can. Alright, so I ran out of polyurethane, so I'm not going to be able to poly these on camera today, but I'll do it another day. I am going to go throw them up on the wall. The paint's dry, and I want you guys to see how they look. Let's do it. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and attach a few of these to the wall. I don't know if you can see this from there, but I'm using some 2.5-inch deck screws. They're weather resistant and they work well from outside the wall. Alright, so try and keep you in focus here. So there is that one, the dual texture little mini crimp, next to a bunch of these other mini crimps made the same way, except I didn't put the dual texture on those ones. Here, this is a plastic climbing bag hold. Plastic bag climbing hold, sorry. There's a little pinch. I made it of 2 angled pieces of wood side by side. Some bigger bolted kind of jug-like wooden climbing holds. A nice little flat sloper on the volume. It's a weird pinch. Here's our U-shaped dual texture that we made. As you can see, it turned out pretty cool looking. And then here's our big dual texture. I think I'll use this one as like a sitting start type hold for the low down climbs. So yeah, pretty cool. Let me know in the comments section if you have questions about the climbing hold, the climbing wall, or different types of climbing holds that you see on this wall.